how Trump became president. That's exactly what happened. We got rid of bullies. A real bully showed up.
Chris Rock just took a wrecking ball to J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump is losing his mind. The comedian's brutal takedown exposed how Vance went from writing about his hillbilly struggles to becoming Trump's favorite Ivy League fancy boy. Remember when Vance was supposedly the voice of the forgotten working class? Now he's sipping champagne with the same elites he once criticized. Trump's Twitter meltdown shows Rock hit a nerve that's got the former president sweating through his orange makeup. Quick favor before we move on. If you appreciate this content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 92% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's free and only takes a second, but it means the world to us. So, did you subscribe already? Great, thank you so much for your support. Now back to the video.
They run the world, man. Yo, man, this crazy. The cast of The Apprentice is running the world. Trump, the daughter, Omarosa.
Remember when J.D. Vance was America's favorite rags to riches story? The guy who wrote that book about growing up poor in Ohio that had everyone talking? Well, that version of Vance seems like ancient history now. During the 2016 election, Vance burst onto the national scene with his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, which quickly climbed the bestseller lists and had people from both sides of the political aisle nodding along. The book painted this vivid picture of Appalachian poverty, family dysfunction, and ultimately, his escape to a better life. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. While America was trying to understand the divisions in our country during that heated election, here comes this guy with a compelling personal story that seemed to explain it all. His tale of growing up in the struggling Rust Belt, dealing with a mom battling addiction, and somehow making it to Yale Law School hit a nerve. The New York Times bestseller list welcomed him with open arms, and suddenly, this previously unknown guy became the voice of forgotten America. But as Chris Rock just brutally pointed out in his viral comedy set, there's something fishy about Vance's transformation from Trump critic to Trump superfan. Rock absolutely roasted Vance, calling him out as the guy who wrote a whole book about how much he hated Trump and now can't stop kissing his butt. The audience couldn't stop laughing, but Trump definitely wasn't amused, judging by his Truth Social meltdown. What makes this flip-flop so jaw-dropping is how complete it is. Vance didn't just slightly modify his views, he did a full political somersault that would make Olympic gymnasts jealous. Before his political career, Vance wasn't shy about trashing Trump. Now he's literally Trump's running mate. That's like writing a 1-star review of a restaurant and then applying to be their head chef. The irony gets even thicker when you follow the money. Hillbilly Elegy wasn't just a critical success. It made Vance seriously rich. The memoir that criticized the very culture that would later embrace Trump turned Vance into a millionaire. So while he's out there campaigning as the champion of the working class, he's cashing royalty checks that came largely from the opposite side of the political spectrum. Talk about playing both sides. Chris Rock's comedy zeroed in on this contradiction with laser precision. He highlighted how Vance went from criticizing Trump in the strongest possible terms to becoming his most loyal defender. It's the kind of character arc that's so unbelievable it would get rejected from a political thriller for being too on the nose. What's fascinating is trying to figure out what triggered this dramatic 180-degree turn. Was it money? The allure of power? Pure political calculation? The transformation certainly didn't happen in a vacuum. Vance looked at the political landscape, saw which way the wind was blowing in Republican circles, and apparently decided that his original principles were more like suggestions than actual beliefs. There's something almost impressive about the audacity of it all. Imagine spending years building a public persona based on authenticity and straight talk, only to completely reinvent yourself when a better opportunity comes along. It's like someone who built their reputation as a vegetarian activist suddenly becoming the spokesperson for a steakhouse chain. Political pundits have tried to explain this shift as strategic positioning, but Rock's comedy cuts through the fancy analysis. His routine suggests a simpler explanation. When criticizing Trump wasn't working for Vance's ambitions anymore, he simply switched teams. Politics makes strange bedfellows, as they say, but this particular partnership feels especially bizarre given their history. The cognitive dissonance is enough to give you whiplash. 1 minute Vance is positioning himself as the authentic voice of working-class Americans struggling against economic forces they can't control, and the next he's embracing the very political establishment he once criticized. The same guy who detailed the struggles of poverty and addiction is now rubbing shoulders with billionaires and power brokers, seemingly comfortable with the contradiction. What makes Rock's takedown so effective is that it wasn't just mean-spirited jabs. It was highlighting the gap between Vance's carefully constructed image and his actual career moves. The success of Hillbilly Elegy gave Vance a platform to speak about class struggles in America. Instead, he used that platform to launch a political career that often seems at odds with the very community he claimed to represent. That gap between Vance's carefully constructed image and reality became the perfect comedy target when Chris Rock stepped up to the microphone. In just under 10 minutes of razor-sharp stand-up, Rock didn't merely critique Vance's transformation. He performed the political equivalent of a public autopsy on it. The routine quickly spread across social media platforms, capturing massive attention and even reaching the easily triggered fingertips of Donald Trump himself. Comedy has always been a powerful weapon against political fakery, and Rock wielded it like a surgeon's scalpel. While news networks tippy-toe around obvious contradictions with, on the one hand, on the other hand analysis, Rock bulldozed straight through Vance's carefully constructed narrative. His routine gained instant viral status because he said out loud what political commentators had been dancing around for months. The audience roared when Rock mockingly referred to Vance as a Yale Law School hillbilly, a phrase that perfectly captured the disconnect between Vance's elite credentials and his attempts to position himself as a champion of ordinary folks. Rock's delivery was merciless, pointing out how absurd it is for someone with Vance's resume to pretend he's just like the struggling workers he claims to represent. But Rock's comedic knockout punch came when he observed that Vance wrote a whole book about his hard life, but now he's living in a mansion paid for by Peter Thiel while pretending he still eats at Cracker Barrel. The line perfectly encapsulated the jarring contrast between Vance's origin story and his current reality as a wealthy politician backed by Silicon Valley money. In just one sentence, Rock managed to expose the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Vance's political persona. The crowd couldn't contain themselves when Rock started imitating Vance, trying to sound like a tough, working-class hero, despite having spent years in the rarefied air of venture capitalism and elite institutions. Rock's impression highlighted how Vance's attempts to connect with blue-collar voters often come across as forced and inauthentic, like watching someone who learned about factory work from a PowerPoint presentation, trying to chat with actual factory workers. What made Rock's routine so devastating wasn't just that it was funny, it was that it was true. Comedy hits hardest when it reveals uncomfortable truths, and Rock managed to distill years of political analysis into a few brutally effective punchlines. By highlighting how Vance had transformed from a critic of the elite to a card-carrying member of it, Rock exposed the kind of hypocrisy that ordinary people can instantly recognize. Media outlets had largely tiptoed around calling out this transformation directly, perhaps worried about appearing biased or losing access. But Rock, unburdened by journalistic conventions, could simply state the obvious. Vance had completely changed his tune when it became politically advantageous to do so. The comedian's willingness to call out this opportunism resonated with viewers who had grown tired of politicians who seemed to treat their principles like fashion accessories, worn when trendy, discarded when not. The routine's widespread sharing across social media platforms demonstrated just how effectively Rock had captured public sentiment. Within hours, clips were being shared, commented on, and memed across the internet. Political commentators who normally wouldn't reference comedy routines in their analysis found themselves discussing Rock's takedown because it had so perfectly captured the essence of Vance's contradictions. What Rock accomplished in those 10 minutes was something that hours of political panel discussions had failed to achieve. He cut through the noise and exposed the fundamental disconnect between Vance's carefully constructed image and his actual life choices. By emphasizing the contrast between Vance's self-portrayal as a voice of the working class and his reality as a wealthy, Yale-educated venture capitalist living in a mansion funded by a tech billionaire, Rock created a caricature that was both hilarious and devastatingly accurate. Of course, the surest sign that Rock's routine hit its mark was Trump's volcanic reaction to it. Nothing confirms a comedy bit's effectiveness quite like the target having a complete meltdown in response. Trump's angry posts only serve to amplify Rock's message and draw even more attention to the very contradictions Rock had highlighted. When Trump started furiously thumb-typing about Rock being a Hollywood elite who hates real Americans, he accidentally pulled back the curtain on his entire political strategy. The man who claims to never watch comedy somehow knew every detail of Rock's routine, and his panicked reaction tells us precisely which nerve got hit. Most politicians develop a thick skin when it comes to comedians. They learn to laugh it off, ignore it, or occasionally respond with a self-deprecating joke of their own. But Trump? He went into full meltdown mode, firing off 12, yes, 12, unhinged Truth Social posts within a single 24-hour period. This wasn't just your standard political response. This was a 5-alarm digital tantrum that would make a toddler denied candy look composed. What makes Trump's social media explosion so revealing isn't just its intensity, but its remarkable contradictions. In one breath, he insists he never watched the routine, yet in the very next post, he's quoting specific jokes and details from it. It's like claiming you've never tasted ice cream while chocolate syrup is still dripping from your chin. The cognitive dissonance would be funny if it weren't coming from a former president and current candidate. His posts grew increasingly bizarre as the hours ticked by. After labeling Rock as unfunny and washed up, the go-to insults in Trump's limited creative arsenal, he pivoted to a strange defense of Vance as a true American success story. The irony, of course, is that Rock's entire routine was about exposing how that success story had been carefully repackaged for political gain, the very thing triggering Trump's digital tantrum. But Trump couldn't stop there. Instead of addressing the substance of Rock's criticisms about Vance's authenticity, he went personal, attacking Rock's divorce, his movie career achievements, and even his physical stature. It was a masterclass in deflection that only served to underscore how deeply the comedy routine had wounded both Trump and the carefully constructed narrative around his running mate. Behind the scenes, Trump's advisors were reportedly in panic mode. Sources say they were frantically urging him to stop posting, concerned that his reactions were only making Vance look worse. Every new angry post from Trump simply amplified Rock's message and drew more attention to the very contradictions the comedian had highlighted. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline while insisting there was no fire in the first place. The question isn't just why Trump reacted so strongly. It's what specifically in Rock's routine terrified him enough to abandon all strategy. Political analysts point to a simple answer. Rock's comedy exposed the fundamental weakness in Trump's entire blue-collar appeal. If voters start questioning whether Vance, the supposed working-class champion, is actually just another elite pretender in workman's clothing, they might start asking similar questions about Trump himself. What makes this reaction particularly telling is how it reveals Trump's awareness of his own vulnerability. His immediate defense of Vance as authentic while attacking Rock as a Hollywood elite who hates real Americans shows exactly what he fears: the exposure of the contradiction at the heart of his political brand. For a movement built on authenticity and anti-elitism, having your carefully selected running mate exposed as the ultimate elite shapeshifter is existentially threatening. Trump's digital meltdown wasn't just embarrassing, it was strategically disastrous. Every post he made reinforced Rock's central point about authenticity, turning what might have been a one-day story into a multi-day news cycle. Political commentators noted that without Trump's reaction, Rock's routine might have remained just another comedy bit. Instead, Trump's response elevated it to a defining moment in the campaign narrative. The panic from Trump's team speaks volumes about how damaging they perceived Rock's routine to be. When your own advisors are begging you to stop defending your running mate, it suggests they recognize just how effectively the comedian punctured the carefully constructed image they've been trying to sell to voters. They weren't just worried about Trump looking bad, they were worried about the entire campaign narrative unraveling. And that's the thing about J.D. Vance's whole story. It's not just a political flip-flop, it's a complete identity makeover. This guy went from being the voice of the forgotten worker to joining the very elite club he once criticized. Talk about selling out. What makes Rock's takedown so perfect is that he used humor to expose what serious news outlets were too afraid to say: that Vance's working-class hero act is totally fake. He stripped away the fancy packaging and showed us the hypocrite underneath. When politicians can't handle being joked about, it usually means the comedian hit a nerve. And boy, did Trump feel that one.